Assuming that Donald Trump signs into law the new stimulus bill, which at the time of this recording he still hasn't done, landlords and tenants are going to get a $25 billion rent relief program. What's included in the program, how it all works, who's eligible, how long it's going to take, and will it be enough are all questions that I'm going to answer in this video. Coming up. Hey guys, if we're just meeting, my name is Vitaly Volpov. I'm a practicing attorney, an active real estate investor, and the part owner of a real estate brokerage in upstate New York. On this channel, I discuss relevant legal concepts as well as best strategies and tips for real estate investing and personal finance. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so that YouTube notifies you of all my future content. If you enjoy the content in this video, hit the like button and comment down below. As always, whenever I'm discussing legal concepts, just remember, nothing that I say should be construed as legal advice. I provide this information for educational and entertainment purposes only, and you should always consult with your own advisor and your own attorney before making any legal or financial decisions. Last but not least, the views and opinions that I express in this video are my own alone and don't necessarily reflect those of my law firm or any of my business partners. Alright, so before we talk about the rental assistance, I first want to mention that the new stimulus bill contains an extension of the CDC eviction moratorium. A couple of weeks ago, I did a video talking about the CDC eviction moratorium and how landlords can still evict tenants despite it being in place. One of the features of the CDC eviction moratorium is that it was set to expire on December 31st, 2020. And I predicted in that video that that moratorium was definitely going to be extended. And now, lo and behold, Congress is extending it through this new stimulus bill. But although Congress is extending it only until January 31st, 2021, I guarantee you, I'm 99.9% confident that either Congress, President-elect Biden, or the CDC are going to extend this eviction moratorium further. So if you're a landlord struggling with a terrible tenant and you're wondering, what can I do? How can I get my property back? You may want to check out that video that I did a couple of weeks ago. I'll put a link to it in the description below and in the YouTube card above, which talks about 6 potential ways that you can evict the tenant, despite the CDC moratorium being in place. Now, as I mentioned in that video, and as I'm telling you in this video, definitely don't try to do this alone. You're going to need an attorney. Talk to a good, qualified, competent eviction attorney, and get help from them before you begin the eviction process. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the emergency rental assistance bill in this new stimulus package. Some of you may know there are a lot of things in the new stimulus bill. In fact, the stimulus bill is an omnibus bill which contains almost 5,600 pages. And there are all kinds of provisions tucked away in this bill. One of them is this rental assistance program. If anyone is curious, it is located on pages 2255 through 2280 of the PDF document that comprises the current version of this bill. So what are the amounts that are appropriated by Congress for this rental assistance purpose? Well, there's a total of $25 billion that Congress has appropriated for it. $400 million of that is going to go to the U.S. territories. Territories like United States Virgin Islands, Guam, Puerto Rico, etc. $800 million of this $25 billion total is going to go to Indian tribes. $15 million is going to go to administrative expenses, and finally $23.785 billion is going to go to the states and local governments within those states. So how is this going to work? How will the funds be distributed? Well, first, the funds are going to originate from the U.S. Treasury. The Treasury is supposed to distribute this $25 billion to the states and the other entities that I just described within 30 days of the enactment of this new stimulus bill. Now, the enactment of the bill doesn't occur until the president signs it into law. So far we've had the House and the Senate vote on it, and it passed with majorities in both houses. The next step is for President Donald Trump to sign it into law. And as you may have heard on the news recently, President Donald Trump does not very much like this new stimulus bill. Although he hasn't said it directly, he has indicated that he may be vetoing this bill. So as of the date of the recording of this video, he still hasn't signed it, and it's possible that this bill may not become law after all. But having said that, I do believe that there will be a stimulus bill that he will sign. Whether or not it contains the $600 or the $2,000 to every American provision in it, I don't know. But I do think that whatever bill he ends up signing is going to contain the rental assistance program within it. This is a bipartisan provision that Congress has put into this bill, and it's been negotiated. I do believe that it will stay intact. So since most of you watching this video are probably living in one of the states within the United States, let's talk about how the $23.875 billion is going to be divided among those states. The bill provides that the funds will be distributed to each state on a pro rata basis based on each state's population. States will then distribute the funds to their applicants. There's a provision in there, however, that says that no state shall receive less than $200 million in rental assistance funds. So as an example of the way that the pro rata apportioning is supposed to work, if we look at the population of New York, which is approximately 20 million people, or 6% of the total population of 330 million people in the United States, we would take the 6%, multiply it by the total amount available, which is $23.875 billion, that's the amount available to the states, and we get somewhere around $1.432 billion. Now, the actual amount on this is going to vary because of the minimum threshold requirement of $200 million per state, but it's likely going to be somewhere around the $1 billion amount for New York. So how will the funds be used? The funds can only be used to, quote, provide financial assistance and housing stability services to eligible households. Financial assistance within the context of this provision means assistance with rent arrears, utilities and home energy costs, utilities and home energy cost arrears, and other expenses relating to housing incurred due directly or indirectly to the virus outbreak. 90% of the funds must go toward financial assistance. 10% of the funds can go toward housing stability services, which would include things like case management and other services related to the outbreak, which are intended to help keep households stably housed. Financial assistance cannot initially exceed 12 months of rent payments. 3 additional months may be provided, quote, only if necessary to ensure housing stability for a household, and this will be subject to the overall availability of funds. Congress wants to make sure that states use the majority of this money, 90%, toward rent arrears, utilities, rent payments, and things like that, and not use the majority of this money for various social programs that they might come up with. So one interesting feature about this program is that there's a limitation on prospective payments. So prospective rent payments, these are payments for rent going forward as opposed to back rent, are limited to no more than 3 months. To the extent that applicants have rental arrears, states may not make commitments for prospective rent payments unless they have also provided assistance to reduce an eligible household's rental arrears. In other words, the rental assistance must go toward back rent first, and only then to prospective rent. And this is an express provision to protect landlords who have been getting killed having to carry all property expenses without rent coming in. Now, if you are a landlord and you've been a landlord most of this year, you know how bad it is right now. A lot of landlords are struggling because tenants haven't been able to pay rent, and landlords have not been able to recover their properties from those tenants because of the various eviction bans. So basically, landlords have been in a no man's land where they can't make money, they can't get revenue to pay for the expenses for their properties, and yet they have to continue maintaining the properties and paying for taxes, insurance, utilities, things like that throughout this pandemic. So Congress, recognizing that, is putting this provision into this bill specifically to help landlords and to ensure that they don't go into foreclosure, to ensure that properties don't become dilapidated, in an attempt to keep rental housing markets solvent. Another interesting thing about this program is that the rental assistance that's going to be coming from it has to be distributed directly to the lessor or the utility provider on behalf of the eligible household. So the default here is that the money will go from the state to the landlord or to the utility company and not to the tenants. Again, this is another provision that was put in here on purpose because Congress knows that if tenants receive this money, they could use it for other things as opposed to using it for their rent, since there are bans on evictions in place currently, and a lot of tenants are not really incentivized to pay their rent because they will stay in the home whether or not they pay or don't pay their landlord. If, after the state has contacted the lessor or utility provider, and the lessor or the utility provider did not accept the payment may be made to the tenant, quote, for the purpose of making payments to the lessor or the utility provider. Another very important provision that is in this program is that Congress specified that the receipt of rental assistance shall not be construed to invalidate any otherwise legitimate grounds for eviction. In other words, a state cannot require landlords to waive their rights to evict tenants for other legitimate reasons, except for non-payment of their arrears for which landlords have received this assistance. So as an example, and this is my interpretation, again, talk to your own counsel. Once this becomes law, make sure you get separate advice, but this is my interpretation of this provision. An example would be a tenant owes 6 months of back rent. Landlord applies on behalf of the tenant, receives 6 months of back rent from the stimulus funds, and then after receiving the payments, the tenant pays rent over the course of the next 2 months, but then stops paying again. The landlord would be able to evict that tenant, assuming other state or federal laws do not restrict evictions, based on subsequent non-payment of rent. So what Congress is trying to avoid is a situation where a state that has received these funds and is set to distribute them to landlords also says to landlords, in order for you to receive these funds, in order for you to accept them, you must attest that you won't evict the tenant for any reason for, say, a period of 1 year. The reason this provision is in here is because Congress understands that if states are allowed to place this type of limitation on the receipt of the assistance funds, then the landlords may end up being in the same position that they're in now in just a few months. With regard to prioritization of assistance, the states are required to prioritize assistance based on any of the following. Income of the household does not exceed 50% of the area median income for households. One or more individuals in the household are unemployed at the time of application and have been unemployed for 90 days preceding the date of application. Or allows states to further prioritize based on household members being unable to, quote, reach their place of employment or because their place of employment was closed due to a shutdown order related to the pandemic. So basically, tenants who fall under any of these categories would be eligible for this rental assistance. So let's talk about how applications for assistance are supposed to be submitted. This provision is one of the most surprising provisions to me, but also one that I think is necessary. The language in the stimulus bill provides that landlords or owners are not precluded from assisting a renter in applying for assistance. Landlords or owners are also not precluded from applying for such assistance on behalf of a renter of such dwelling. In the event that landlords do submit an application on behalf of their tenants, there are some additional requirements. The landlord must obtain the tenant's signature on the application, which can be done electronically. Documentation of such application must be provided to the tenant by the landlord, and, quote, any payments received by the landlord from a payment made under this section shall be used to satisfy the tenant's rental obligations to the owner. The key thing here, in my opinion, is getting your tenant's cooperation to sign the application. Depending on your relationship with the tenant and how things have gone so far, this may be hard or it may be easy. I know a lot of tenants have basically stopped responding to their landlords. They have blocked their phone numbers and have been ignoring them for months and not paying any rent because they know about the eviction bans. In that circumstance, it may be very hard for a landlord to actually get through to a tenant, get them to agree to sign an application which would allow the landlord to get paid. I think one possible negotiating tactic could be that if they do this, if they sign an application, if they help you apply for them on their behalf and you get paid the rent that is due, then they won't have a judgment hanging over their heads because remember, even though the eviction bans are in place, it does not mean that rent has been canceled. So those tenants who owe this back rent at some point will eventually owe this money. The longer they go without making payments, the more they'll owe at the end of the day when the eviction bans are lifted and landlords can take the tenants to court and obtain judgments against them. So in this regard, it's actually to the tenant's benefit to agree to cooperate with the landlord and sign the application for this rental assistance as opposed to just ignoring their landlord. So this may be one way you can talk to your tenants and try to get them to understand that this is for their benefit, not just your benefit. Obviously, you can also negotiate other deals where maybe the rental assistance won't be enough to cover all the arrears that are currently owed, but you will forgive whatever the remainder is if the tenant agrees to sign this application and if you get the payment from the state. So obviously, this is not a foolproof method to obtaining cooperation from the tenants, and it's not really ideal to have to get the tenant's signature, but at the same time, it's a lot better than what New York State did a few months ago where only tenants could apply, and a lot of tenants simply didn't know how, or didn't do it right, or didn't care to apply, and therefore the assistance didn't get to the tenants and the landlords where it was intended to go. An eligible household is defined as a household of one or more individuals who are obligated to pay rent on a residential dwelling where the state determines that one or more individuals within the household has 1. Qualified for unemployment benefits, or 2, experienced a reduction in household income, incurred significant costs, or experienced other financial hardship due directly or indirectly to the virus outbreak. and this must be attested to in writing by the applicant. The definition reads further that one or more individuals within the household can demonstrate a risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability, which may include 1. A past due utility or rent notice or eviction notice, 2. Unsafe or unhealthy living conditions, or 3. Any other evidence of such risk as determined by the state. And finally, the household has a household income that is not more than 80% of the area median income for that household. So in order to be eligible, all 3 of these bullet points need to be true. That is, one or more of the individuals within the household is on unemployment or experiencing a reduction in their income, that they are also at risk of eviction, which can be shown by past due utility, rent notice, or eviction notice, or by showing that there are some kind of unhealthy living conditions, or any other evidence that the state will dictate, and that the household has an income that is not more than 80% of the median income. So what this is saying is that priority will be given to those households who are currently struggling financially. And this is understandable. Presumably individuals and households that are not paying their rent right now are doing so because they've hit a financial hardship as a result of the pandemic. So I think that most households that haven't paid their rent so far are probably easily within these categories. In determining the income of a household, the grantee shall consider the following. 1. The household's total income for calendar year 2020, or 2. Sufficient confirmation of the household's monthly income at the time of application, which will be redetermined every 3 months. So presumably a state's application process is going to ask tenants to provide some documentation showing what their income has been in the year 2020. Alternatively, tenants may be able to submit information that shows what their current monthly income is on a month-to-month basis. Now, in all likelihood, states are not going to be able to roll these programs out very quickly, and we're likely looking at maybe February or March at the earliest when these programs and these applications are going to be accepted. So by then, hopefully, tenants will have their tax returns done and will be able to use it as documentation to show proof of their 2020 income. So other notable provisions in here include that assistance received by or credited to the household will not be regarded as income or as a resource for purposes of determining eligibility for any other benefits or assistance. So rental assistance provided pursuant to this program won't be counted as income for tax purposes, for example, or for any other local or state programs that may exist. Additionally, the Inspector General of the Treasury Department is granted the power to recoup the funds from any state, territory, or unit of local government which fails to comply with the requirements relating to the use of funds. And this is relating to what I was talking about a couple of minutes ago, where the states are required to use at least 90% of these funds to pay for rent arrears, rental assistance, and utility payments, and not for any other type of social programs. If states violate this, this provision says that the Inspector General can recoup these funds directly from the states and basically claw them back to the federal government. This should provide a disincentive for states to get into any kind of shenanigans with this money. So what are the potential issues with this program? Well, first question is, will $25 billion be enough? My hunch is probably not. According to some estimates, approximately 20 million renters are behind on rent right now. Nearly 12 million of those renters will owe an average of $5,850 in back rent and utilities by January 2021. And this is according to Moody's Analytics and the Washington Post. Other estimates put the total rent and utilities arrears around $70 billion by January 2021. Now, I'm no math whiz, but $25 billion does not equal $70 billion. So we're likely going to have a pretty significant shortfall despite this rental assistance being in place. Another issue that I see is the lack of efficiency by state governments in being able to distribute this rental assistance. You can look no further than the example of New York State from earlier this year. New York State was allocated $100 million from the CARES Act for rent relief. It passed legislation in May 2020 authorizing the spending and creation of a convoluted application process. Landlords could not apply for their tenants, unlike this bill. Tenants had only 3 weeks from mid-July to first week of August to apply. Rent assistance was only partial based on another convoluted formula, and many tenants didn't know about it and so didn't apply, or they filled out the applications incorrectly, or they simply weren't eligible because of the convoluted application criteria. As of October 28, 2020, the New York Housing Agency distributed only $23,210,000 to 9,611 applicants of the total $100 million that was allocated. approximately $16,767,000 in rent assistance was, quote, pending distribution to another 5,411 more applicants. The rest, some $60 million, has yet to be distributed, and it's been months. We're talking about 4, 5, 6 months since this could have been distributed originally. The state did nothing more from August 6, 2020, when the application portal closed, to December 2020 to try to distribute more of this money. It was not until December 3rd, just a couple of weeks ago, that Cuomo finally announced that he would issue an executive order to reopen the application window again so that the rest of the money could be distributed. All because they realized that the money could be recouped back by the federal government if it wasn't spent by December 31st. This is what we have to look forward to. State governments, like New York, distributing this rental assistance. Do I think that they're going to be efficient? No, I definitely don't think they're going to be efficient. My prediction is that it's going to take New York State several months to distribute this money to those who need it. I'm really hoping that I'm wrong about this, but honestly, recent past history hasn't given me a ton of confidence in our state government's ability to do this well. So what should landlords do now? Well, the first thing is hope that Donald Trump actually signs this stimulus bill into law. If he doesn't do that, then, all of this is out the window. The next thing you should do is find out which agency in your state will be administering this rent relief. Add their website to your favorites tab and check on it daily. Keep an eye on your state's news for announcements of when the applications will be accepted. You want to get in there and be one of the first to do so because I think this money is going to go fast. We know that it's not enough to cover all the arrears and help everyone. So the longer you wait, the less likely it will be that you will actually get any funds from this. Reach out to your tenants who are behind on their rent ahead of time and let them know that this is coming. Talk to them, explain to them the benefits for them and for you in applying for this as soon as possible. Your state agency will likely release additional guidance and information and instructions on how you should apply, and will likely add additional bureaucratic complications to the application process. So just expect that and know that it's coming and be ready for it. Finally, when the application period opens, make sure that you apply as soon as possible. So with that said, that's going to do it for this video. If you have any questions about anything that I said, please drop a comment in the comment section below. I try to answer every single question that I get. If you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, hit the like button, and if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, definitely subscribe so that you don't miss any of my future content. Lastly, if you are trying to diversify your investments right now, if you're not all in real estate and you're looking to invest in stocks, bonds, or ETFs, I would suggest using a commission-free platform like Webull. Right now, Webull is running a promotion where you get 4 free stocks for signing up using my link in the description below. Each of those stocks may be valued up to $1,600. So if you're interested in that, click on the link in the description below. You will help my channel out and you will get some free stocks in the process. Thanks again for watching. Happy holidays, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.